Good people, it's your boy Sky for Politricked here on the Got What You Need network. Make sure that you support the other podcasts on this great network. That is Talking with E, Life and Love, the Black Male podcast, as well as Encourage and Inspire. Go ahead and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. We're doing something a little different today, post-election. I have a very special guest. It was humbling that it was somebody who actually listened to some past episodes and was intrigued and wanted to come and discuss some things. Usually when people hear you, they want to come and they want to argue because they totally disagree with you. So it's real nice just to have somebody reach out and want to have some good political discourse or discussion, for lack of a better term. Mr. Jamie Miller, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing? Thanks for having me on.
Oh, my pleasure. Tell the people just a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I am a Republican political consultant and have worked in mostly Florida politics for about 30 years. I was a former executive director of the state Republican Party. I'm a veteran of the 2000 presidential campaign and recount here in Florida.
Oh, wow.
And where 6 million votes were cast and 537 votes determined the winner after 37 days. So, and then I went on to become a senior advisor for Newt Gingrich's presidential campaign in 2012 in Florida, and have worked with everything from a local rural hospital emergency room bond to senior advisor for president. So I've done things, just boots on the ground and I started out as a field organizer, in Southwest Florida. I'm currently in Sarasota, Florida. I write a Substack called Reasonable Arguments because I want to try to bring the reasonable back to our arguments. And I was like, well, let's just explain it that way. And then I've written a book called a nonpartisan book called American Speeches That Changed History. So I have everything in there from Patrick Henry to Barack Obama.
Oh, wow. All right. Well, I'll give a little political background because I guess it'll give some context to this discussion. It's crazy because it was back in it was in 2001. Went through a tough time. My grandmother passed, and we all traveled to Mississippi for her funeral. And I found out there she dedicated her life to voter registration, like in Greenwood, Mississippi, so in the Delta. And and they're going on and on at the funeral talking about how politically active she was. And then the governor of Mississippi at the time sent one of his top executives, I don't think it was like the lieutenant governor, but someone high up in the office to read a proclamation from the governor's office. So, besides
how
obviously
inspiring,
being sad, you're crying, but then you're prideful at the same time. So I'm like, wow, man, like I never knew, this stuff, because when, we went down there, she wanted to hear about, girlfriends and, different stuff like that. She wasn't gonna I know how some grandparents pass on their political work to their children and their grandchildren, and it becomes a legacy. And it just wasn't that case. But when I got back to my second home of Virginia, Lynchburg to be exact, Liberty University, one of the most conservative places on earth, I wanted to get involved in voter registration. So I reached out to some local people there. And then once the Democratic Party of Virginia heard about it, they gave me a job working on the John Kerry campaign. So I was a field organizer in Virginia for maybe 2 months. And then once they figured that, he wasn't going to beat Bush, and in Virginia, they moved us out. They moved us out to Wisconsin. So it's like, wait a minute, we talk about
that's sort of like my job with Newt Gingrich. Like, oh, you lost. The end of job.
So So, you know, I want to go into all what happened in 2004. We obviously know GWUN, but it gave me some great experience from like East Coast, you know, kind of mid-Atlantic, you know, Southern politics, and then some more Midwestern politics and their values and things like that or whatever. I did some field work for the Obama '08 campaign in Virginia as well. But enough about me.
Well, thank you for doing that. I think, you know, we maybe do it for different sides, but, you know, doing something like that in the trenches, you know, like you've done and I've done, you know, it helps. I think it helps all of us, you know, bring more people to the process, right? And the more
Yeah.
people involved in the process, the better the process is going to work.
Man, I'll give you a quick story. I was working for a local delegate in Virginia, and I remember the first time we had this real like grassroots support system, like just local people. Like even when the news came out to do it, it was people from the neighborhood, and people saw themselves in this candidate. And I remember 2 years later when she ran, you know, they, you know, had a little extra money, brought in some, you know, some big wigs to speak for on her behalf. And I remember the people from the community saying, it don't seem like it's our campaign anymore, Sky. Like we voted because, you know, and not just saying it was me, but we saw you, we saw other people that we see every day. And when we saw you next to her on the news and then they asked you to speak, we like, whoa, okay, I know he's speaking for me. Like, you know, so, but let's I like where this is going. Because one of the best things I tell people all the time would turn me off from campaigning, you know, just regularly, you know, just looking for the next candidate, who's running, how much they paying, you know, that kind of thing, or whatever, was the lack of what we're about to do right now and just have a discussion. I remember even back working on Kerry's campaign out in Milwaukee and, you know, Kenosha and areas around there, there was a group of Republicans, and we meet up every night after work and drink, like, and just talk, and, you know, and just talk about, man, like, we wish that both sides, even then, just found a way to finagle these views or policies, because at the end of the day, when we talk, we all wanted the same thing.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? All right. Well, let me just give a quick recap of my feelings about Tuesday night, and then you can follow up, and then we could just take the conversation from there. A lot of my supporters reached out, you know, disappointed, obviously upset, but and that's natural. I guess what bothered me was all the finger pointing, you know, whose fault, who didn't come out, who didn't turn out, those kind of things. And what I'm, from where I'm sitting, standing, or whatever, what I try to tell people is this election was lost with the bad handling of the bad handling and the bad messaging in the immigration. I felt like, and I still feel this way, and I said it on past podcasts, we can't be scared of enforcing the law. And I saw in too many cities accommodations were made, and, you know, and I'm not just, oh man, they got gift cards, they got hotel rooms. It's deeper than that, guys. The Democrats, if you go walk up to an average Democratic consultant, candidate, or even somebody in office, and you say, hey, I hate my homeless problem in my area, why are these people on the streets when we have empty buildings, we have hotel rooms that go empty night after night after night, unless it's a convention, whatever. And they usually give you some answer, this, that, and the other, some crazy answer. But when you turn around and you say, well, why is it that somebody that's not even from this country come and all of a sudden you're making those accommodations, you're building tent cities, and you're doing all of this, and they usually don't have an answer for that. And like I said, I spoke on a past podcast about it, and I got beat up about it. And I said, and that's the problem. We can't have it both ways. You know, you can't say, well, it's, you know, a homeless problem is deeper than that. It costs money. We don't have that money. But then you don't want to offend a big voter base of yours. So you go at this problem that, you know, you don't have to be insensitive, but once again, they came into the country not the right way. You know what I'm saying? So, and what I'm trying to tell my listeners and my supporters is, until they stop trying to straddle this line. And I'll give you another example, and it's more of a New York problem, is the bail reform. I understand the spirit of that law. It came from the Khalif Browder, the backpack, and dying in Rikers Island, you know, and, you know, and you saying, okay, what was somebody that was accused still in the backpack in Rikers anyway, and this kind of thing. But then you turn around and you take that problem, trying to fix that problem and try to eliminate that thing. And just like the immigration with the buses, you know, bad apples or whatever you want to call them, jump on the bus too, which is natural. Hey, if he's sending them up from Texas, I'm going to jump on him. The same thing with the bail reform. Now everybody's benefiting from it. And now you got people who you didn't want to benefit from it. And from where I'm sitting, I'm screaming is, you telling me you can't fix that? You can't say, hey, this is eligible for bail reform, but somebody that's committed a violent crime over and over again, they stay.
Right.
You know, so
I agree with you. Like I think that I say this, is the election results, I think, are a cautionary tale for Trump as well. You know, while he won, I think that what people were saying is, we want more common sense. Like, we want more common sense applied to these rules. We don't want boys playing in our girls' sports. We don't want boys in our girls' bathrooms. We don't want boys in our women's prisons. You know, things like that. I mean, and I'm just kind of tone deaf, but to me, that makes no common sense, right? To have boys playing in women's sports. And I don't know how. To me, it seemed really hypocritical of the Harris campaign to say, I'm for women's rights, but I'm not for girls, who a whole 2 or 3 generations of women fought for Title IX, right? And to have a soccer team at a school where there's a football team, a girls' soccer team where there's a football team, and now you're going to let boys get scholarships to be on that girls' soccer team. And I'm not trying to take anything away from anyone's identity. That's not. I'm not somebody who. I don't judge somebody by their.
You don't even have to qualify it, man.
Okay, but but it's, if you're talking about an adult can do what adult, like, that's what's American. Like, you're an adult, go do what you want, identify how you want. But when you start talking about tax dollars and scholarships and health, and, you know, you have a 5'3" middle school girl and a 6' middle school boy spiking a volleyball, that's dangerous. It's not only not fair, it puts the girl in danger in these sports. And so I think we could, I mean, I could go down examples. I don't know that it's really beneficial to the conversation, but I think that's what people said. You know, I think that people looked at the prosecutions of Donald Trump and said they were political. And so, but I think the cautionary tale for Trump is, we don't want you doing it either. You know, we don't want you doing political prosecutions either. And so when he has that rhetoric leading into the campaign, and we all know that all these politicians have rhetoric, right? And it's so rhetoric doesn't mean actions of the administration. Just like when Biden had rhetoric, it didn't mean that he was going to go out and do that. It just meant that's what he was saying, right? And so I think Americans in this election separated rhetoric from actions. And, you know, I write on my Facebook page every single election because I have so many friends and family who follow, and they're friends. They're true friends, you know, that I have over for Thanksgiving dinner or whatever. And I say, you know, we're the one people in the world, the only people in the world who can look at our government and say, we collectively are stronger than any one person, even if that person's president of the United States. Because you as a Democrat field organizer and me as a Republican field organizer, if you and I disagree on something and we collectively decide to tell our government they got off the reservation, the government's going to listen. And I think that's what happened on Tuesday when you start looking at the numbers, and Trump grew his votes in every category, every demographic except for 65 and plus, 65 and older. He went down like 2 points, and white, college educated women, he went down 2 points. Every other demographic, he maybe didn't win African American men, but I know I saw a stat in Georgia where he went from 10% to 24%. So he grew his margins in whether it was Jewish, Hispanic, 18 to 30, 30 to 44, every age group under 65, he grew his, and he grew his margins in 48 of 50 states. So this was, you know, this was kind of like, I feel like it was like, hey, Democrats, you went too far on some of these things. You went too far saying we have to have electric vehicles. Like, I may not want an electric vehicle. Let the market decide. Let people, you know, there's plenty of people who have them and love them. I live in Florida, and as you know, in Sarasota, I just had a hurricane come within a mile of my house, the center of the storm, and nobody evacuated using their electric vehicle because they knew they couldn't get 300 miles away out of the path of the storm and know that they were going to be able to recharge their vehicles. So they left them in their garages. And then when their garages got flooded, their houses caught on fire. And people don't think about the practical application of some of these laws and mandates that people were putting down. Like if you look at Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and Palm Beach counties, right, in Southeast Florida, and you have a hurricane and you have to evacuate that area, that's the population of Maryland, the 10th largest state in the country. And you know how far they can get on one charge of electricity? Disney World in Orlando.
I was just about to say Orlando, right?
And so now how do you move 10 million people in a crisis, or let's even say 3 million cars? Pick a number, it's a million or more.
Yeah.
And you know, we have enough hard time getting gas to Orlando to have people fill up and get out of the state. How do you do that? And so I think people thought like, oh, this is a great idea, and electric cars are a great idea if you're going to the grocery store or to work. But when you start thinking about the practical application of having to leave in a disaster, they're the worst idea ever. Like everybody I know who has an electric car has a gas powered car in case they have to leave during a hurricane, and they leave the electric car behind. And so I hope that's what I hope I'm interpreting that correct, number one. And I may not be, but
no, it's not an interpretation. That's the best thing about having, would you say, reasonable arguments, that we can have reasonable arguments. I didn't agree with every absolute thing you said, but it's sensible. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And one of my favorite shows, even though it was a TV show, was The West Wing. And I talk to people about, like, I'm like, yes, that's a fantasy. But if they really worked like that, we'd really get things done. And once again, I started off my rant talking about extreme policies of Democrats. I wasn't like, oh, the other side. I always think that it's better to talk about, even if we had won. It's like, what do we do to unite people and show people that maybe didn't vote for you that like I still have your back? If like a Republican in Florida, like let's say if I was a politician there, I wouldn't want a Republican to be wary when the storm came through, to think that I was weak in regards to getting the funds there, and getting the funds there quickly without all the red tape, without all the lines, without the jammed up hotline, all that. You understand what I'm saying?
I understand.
So like, I was talking to my wife. We were just going crazy over just the political ads, and they were saying something about a young woman running out of Long Island, and they said something about taxes, and oh, she's going to do this. And I said, man, let's say if she was going to raise taxes, you know what the biggest problem that people have with taxes? And she was like, what? They don't know where the money's going.
Truer words.
Let's just talk
so
about
true.
Like, don't get me wrong, you can't tax a person out of house and home. Like, so I don't want people listening to think that. But people would accept certain costs or a rise in certain things if you itemized it. This is how we are going to 100%. Spend your damn money.
Yeah.
And that, so what frustrates me is if I could sit here, yeah, I worked on a campaign or whatever, but I'm no Einstein, I'm no smarter than the next man or woman, then why are the people that get paid to solve these problems can't come to a compromise that, look, when you say compromise, we have this pipe dream that everybody's going to be happy. That's not what compromise means. Like, yeah. Like it just doesn't.
I always say compromise is when your parents sat you down, and my parents did this thing if we were fighting over a candy bar. Like, you get to cut it in half, and the other one gets to pick first. That's compromise, because nobody wins, because I want the whole candy bar. I want the whole thing. And my sister wanted the whole thing. But the compromise was my parents like, you cut. So if I cut out a little piece, guess what? She's going to take the big piece. So I want to cut it right down the middle. So at least I get half, right? Because she gets to pick first. And if she cut, I got to pick first. And so it's it's kind of a compromise is not meant to make everybody walk away happy. I've worked with we have, I'm in one of the most conservative areas in America, in Sarasota, Florida. And we have one of the most conservative congressmen, one of the reddest congressional districts. And, we just voted 85%, to your point, 85% for a penny sales tax for schools. And they said, you know what they did? They said, this penny is going to go towards sports, arts, go down the list. And there's a list, right? This penny is going to go towards that to make sure that we have this in Sarasota County forever. Music, all these things, right? So to your point, we just did the same thing with a bond for our, what we call our legacy trail, which is our bike trail, $60 million bond, but it's going to go, and we're going to have a safe bike trail that's going to go throughout the entire county. It's going to have bridges going over the roads, so bikers are safe. Motors, cars don't have to worry about hitting them. So I think you just make a great point that we as Americans are willing to share our money with society.
Yeah,
we know where the money's going.
Like it's really simple, and sometimes it gets framed like, oh, it's not yours, it's not. No, I'm not saying mine personally, but if you're asking me to contribute more of what is mine personally, like, just, hey, where's it going? Like, I'm cool with helping people. I have no problem with that. What we have a problem with, because we see it all the time, is mishandling of money. Right. Look what's going on in New York. Once again, a Democratic stronghold where they can't get the congestion pricing problem fixed. But what people like me are saying is that they raise the price on the subway every 2 or 3 years. What's happening with that money? And everybody who steps down gets gets something attached to them when they leave.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm saying is we have to stop putting misappropriation of funds on the general public. And that's no matter where it's at. That could
I
be
agree.
New York, that could be, Sarasota, that could be wherever. And a lot of times, those type of, I guess, complexities get mixed in with well, how are we going to pay for it? And it's like, no, we get that, but I felt like I already gave you my money to pay for it. What what happened?
What did you do with that?
Yeah, what did you do with
Yeah,
that?
I don't give my kids an allowance and they come back for the extra. I don't know what an allowance is. My kids are 30, but when I gave them $10 a week or whatever, they're like, I need another $10. I don't just give them a $10. I'm like, what'd you do with that first $10? Like, what'd you waste that on? So I don't, I agree with you.
And Jamie, I'll bring up another point that I saw upstate New Yorkers, especially in the congressional races, getting hammered on, was the defund the police. And I always laugh at Congressman out of South Carolina, Clyburn, because he was the one that was like, I never said it, don't attach me to it, or what have you. And I said, babe, here's another example of not being able to articulate what you wanted. Yes, it's fine if you don't want military items with your local police. There's if you want more accountability to the police, but everything don't have to be a damn slogan. Because guess what happens with slogans? Like, you get attached to it and you get attached to its entirety. They don't say, oh, he means defund the police, but he only means the bad ones, or the ones that,
Right.
violate their oath. Now, all of those people, all the Democrats upstate are getting attached to it. And I said, now, guess what it looks like? They're weak on crime. And now everything that goes on in New York City with the bail reform and everything like that, they get attached to it. And it's so, and once again, I don't think it's anybody sensible that don't want more police in their municipality.
Let's start with saying, hey, we want safer neighborhoods. And
There
how
we
do
go.
we get them? And I haven't lived the same experience you have, but I've heard from people who have said, for my neighborhood to be safe, I need the police to be safer towards me. And I think people on the right need to listen to that as well and recognize that there are people in our society who feel like the police are not safe to them. And so if we start the conversation with I think we all agree we want safer neighborhoods. So what do we have to do to have safer neighborhoods? We have to have police, but those police need to be trained that not every single person's a bad person just because they might be making a mistake in that moment. Right.
Yeah.
And so, or maybe they're not even making a mistake in a moment. Maybe it's wrong time, wrong play, wrong time, wrong place.
You see how you're making my point, and it's not like, or you're helping my point, excuse me, and it's not, let's take money, like, you understand what I'm saying? It's like,
I like to say that it sounds like you and I are in violent agreement.
No, and I just I'm it just feels so good to laugh and know that, like, we're gonna go back to our lives. We're probably gonna vote different. We're probably stand for different policies or whatever. But at the end of the day, I think we still want the same country. Like,
that's why I think, and that's why I'm really proud to be on your program. So number one, thank you for having me. But I think that if these conversations, and we can start talking about combined like goals, right? You have goals, I have goals. And most of the time, and I think that's something that Vice President Harris said in her speech, is she didn't quite, I don't think, make the sale. But
yeah,
what she said was, like, we all kind of want the same things. whether you get there from the left and I get there from the right, we want safe streets for our children. We want good schools for our children. We want opportunities. We want we want our tax dollars being spent wisely, and some people would say, oh, that's lower taxes. But, you may say, I'm willing to pay more taxes as long as you're spending the money wisely, right? And so, we want some fiscal accountability. And so if we can start with those joint goals that regardless of if you're on the right or the left, there's some broad goals I think we agree on,
Yeah. And
and
then even when you start to attack like the more sensible, I guess the more contentious, let's say, thing, let's talk about like immigration a little bit. I don't think anybody on the left who isn't thinking of, I'm going to lose votes with my decision. Let's just say anybody that's just thinking of, I'm living in my city and I hear that busloads of people that aren't from this country are being allowed to stay at a hotel that I can't afford to stay at if I wanted to go there, and they're being allowed to stay there for free. And they're being fed, and I'm talking to my kids about why they can't have pizza tonight. You understand what I'm saying? And I think that Democrats, people on the left, progressive, whatever you want to label them as, has to stop being scared of saying that we're a land of laws. You could be against over prosecuting someone, when you could say that in some places the judicial system is broke or what have you. But we have immigration rules and laws for a reason. Budgets in each city and each town, each state are set up for those people that live there, not for an influx of thousands and thousands of people that they can't account for, they didn't account for. And I don't think people realize that a lot of times these hotels and these organizations are fighting to get this money after they don't just pay these hotels. They promise them that they're going to pay them. Mm-hmm. Then these organizations have to go and fight with the government to say, hey, I did what you asked me to do. I put these people up because you said it was the right thing to do. Like, that's the American thing to do. You want to be compassionate, you want to be this. And now you put these people in the hole.
Yeah, and I think most of us are, I don't know of people who are against immigration. What we're against is our government.
Say that again. That's a great point, because sometimes I like me and people like me do mislabel it to just say, oh, you anti-immigration or whatever. So no,
I don't know people who are against immigration. What I'm against, I don't want to speak for everybody, but what I'm against is our government not knowing who's coming, and if they're criminals, if they're sex trafficking, if they're the cartel, if they're drug traffickers. You and I probably know many immigrants, and they're good people. And people have asked me, it's like, oh, you're against immigration because of voting. I'm like, no, I really believe most of the immigrants who are coming at the end of the day are going to vote Republican because they are coming for the American dream. The vast majority, 80, 90, whatever that percentage is, I don't want to put a percentage on it, but like whatever that percentage is, the vast majority are coming to live the American dream. They want to participate in our economy. They want to succeed. They don't want to be in the hotel. They want to have their own place. They want to be able to buy a house and send their kids to school just like all of us, right? And but when our government just opens up the border and then says, listen, there were 300, the Department of Homeland Security cannot find 300,000 children. 300,000 children, that's the population of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I mean, so when the government says, and the Department of Homeland Security, this is Biden's department, says, Yeah, not only do we not know where they are, we don't know if they're enslaved, being sex trafficked, or even if they're alive. And if we collectively aren't going to take care of children who come across that border and keep track of them and know where they are, we failed. And
Yeah.
we especially children. And I'm not, listen, I'm not trying to make a broader immigration statement. I'm just saying I think we all can agree that our government should know where these children are and make sure they're not being abused, and our government can't. And I think that's a frustration of mine. And so there's rules in place to immigrate to the United States, and let's follow the rules.
Yeah.
Now we have this issue where, if you go back 10 or 20 years, even there's people been here 20, maybe even 40 years who are illegal, quote, illegal, right? But they've been paying taxes, they've been raising children, they've been all of these things. And so, I don't know what the answer is, but I do know that.
Yeah, and I'm just so glad you brought that point up, because I didn't even think to bring that up. There are people been here like lifetime, and don't have any legal documentation, but work, pay taxes, raise the family, because you know what, their kids are the DACA kids that are now trying to get into school or what have you. Before I lose my thought, but you bring up some great points, but I also applaud you. You don't pretend to have like all the answers. You just know that we have laws.
Like one law that we have that we recognize, and if you are a diplomat at the United Nations and you have a child here, that child's not a U.S. citizen. And it's a U.S. Supreme. I'm not going to remember the U.S. Supreme. I'm not a lawyer, but it's a U.S. Supreme Court case that basically says if you have allegiance to another country, your children are not, and if your children are born here, they are not citizens. And so, and I'm not sure how we define allegiance legally, but if we can start with some sort of baseline of, hey, are you coming here to be an American, or are you coming here to be something else? And and I don't know what you define something else, but if you're going to be more loyal to another country and try to be a citizen here, that should be a disqualifier.
Yeah. There's a local mayor here from Edison, New Jersey, and a couple of buses came to his city. He turned them right back around. He was like, he said, I have one of the most diverse communities in the state, but they don't belong here. So we're gonna, make sure everybody's okay, but we're escorting them right back out the state. Or what?
There's 2 points. Governor DeSantis here in Florida, he gets a little bit of a bad rap, and he earned some of it. But but he put immigrants that came by plane from a place in Texas to Jacksonville, put them on a bus, and sent them to Martha's Vineyard. Like, oh, you want to have a sanctuary city? You send them there. We don't allow sanctuary cities here. And the other point was when
and let me stop you there, just to bring up a point. Is I'm totally against that practice, but at the same time, it woke everybody up and it made it a national issue. So I can't let you get that without.
No, I'm not saying what he did was right. I'm just saying, like it was kind of like, hey, you are supporting this policy that does not impact you. Well, let's see how you act when it does impact you. And the other thing was when there was the gang violence in Haiti, and Haitians started saying, hey, we're going to come to Florida, we're going to get in boats and come to Florida. Ron DeSantis said, no, we as a state are not going to accept you. And so nobody got on boats. The Haitians who left Haiti, got on a plane and came here, and they're wherever they are. But Ron DeSantis said, we're not having this mass exodus and coming into our state, because there's people standing in line who are trying to do it the right way, who should be not lose their place in line. And they should be allowed in and be vetted and be able to, people who we know are going to contribute to our society on day one, not pull out of society on day one, not pull tax dollars or not pull Social Security or SSI or Medicare or Medicaid. They're going to come in and they're going to have a job. They're an engineer or they're a power worker. I mean, now I guarantee if you're a power worker somewhere, you can get right into our country because we need some people stringing some lines in North Carolina and Florida and all over the place. Like we need power workers. And so there's a demand, right? And so if you're going to come in and be an immediate positive impact on society, then and we know who you are, you've been vetted, all those things you've talked about. So I really appreciate the conversation.
Man, like even when they announced like they're like walking these caravans, I'm like, all right, no one's saying nothing about all the countries they're walking past. Like I know I know it sounds silly, but I heard Belize is a nice place. Like none of them want to go there. Like it's like all the way through, Mexico, and then I'm like, okay. Someone was like, yeah, Sky, but it's political violence. I'm like, oh, and Mexico ain't violent? So they're walking through.
Well, if you're walking all that way, I'm like, who's picking up the garbage? Like, like who's providing medical care? Because somebody's sprained an ankle, broke a leg. Like how is that happening? And if they're getting on a bus, who's paying for that bus ticket? And I'm not suggesting that the person coming here didn't pay for it, but it appears that they're fleeing without much, as far as the way of money or other things. And so, somebody's paying for it. And I was just like, why are they, what's their motivation for doing this?
And we have to be able to distinguish between someone living in a country that's poor and a country that has political discourse to where they can no longer be safe. Yes, going hungry, starving are tragedies, no matter the country, the person, or what have you. But imagine somebody in this country saying, this country can't feed me. I want to go somewhere else and eat because I think they'll better take care of me. We have people coming in from Venezuela. Anybody listening, Google going into Venezuela illegally and see what the crime is. Like, it's not sending you back to America, it's putting you in jail. So I try to, even though we're talking politically, I just try to bring like common sense to like some of this stuff too. And people try to hijack issues for.
And I try, and I try to be sensitive to it. And as a field organizer, you probably have a lot of stories like I do. But one of mine was I went door to door for the guy who's going to be the incoming Speaker of the House of Florida, Danny Perez.
Okay.
And he lives in Little Havana in Miami. And so I went down there door to door. I was like, oh, I'm going to help the guy. I think he's a great guy. He's young. He's, and you want to talk about, number one of the most patriotic things I've ever done in my life. I encourage anybody who loves going door to door to go door to door. And whether you agree or disagree, go door to door in Little Havana in Miami. You're talking about almost 100% Cuban immigrants, 100% Spanish spoken at home, and some no English at all. And Danny's sitting there translating, and you hear these stories from people who are in their 80s who were political prisoners. And you go to a precinct in Little Havana, and it's a festival. It is it's a festival of freedom. And I'm not kidding. Like, it's the only way to describe it. And and you think, okay, and how can I be, like, how can you be against these folks coming here? Right? So you can't be against them coming here. It's just like you have to come the right way. And so, but you would love it. Like, as a field organizer, you would just love it, because from door after door after door, I heard these personal, emotional stories of, yeah, I spent 3 years in prison. I was like, what did you spend 3 years in? And they're proud. They're like, I spent 3 years in prison. I spent 3 years in prison for putting a yard sign in my yard, a political yard sign. 3 years in prison.
Damn.
I mean, think about that.
Yeah, right.
Right? Like, and so you hear these stories, you're like, I just can't believe that. And they're like, so yeah, I'm gonna go vote because like you have no idea like how free it is here. Like you have no idea.
Yeah.
And you may not notice, but or I'm not sure if we're on video or not, but I also am there's a weird little contest in Key West, Florida in the summer called the Hemingway Lookalike Contest.
Okay.
So I grow the beard and do Ernest Hemingway. But one of the things we do is every December we go down to Cuba on a missionary. It's not really Christian. It's just a missionary. We take food and toys and baseball. Hemingway spent a lot of time in Cuba and was a big fan of baseball. So we'll take baseball bats and gloves. And it's not my story. I wasn't there, but this one gentleman tells the story of this kid who went past a baseball glove and held up a bag of rice, white rice. Look, Mom, I got food. He passed up a baseball glove to take food to his mother.
Wow.
And if that's, that's what's happening in the world today. This was last December that this happened. This isn't 40 years ago. This is last December. And so you kind of, we have to temper our rhetoric on these things.
Man, that you need to get that on a t-shirt. Like we can put that on both sides, man. We can become billionaires with that one.
Let's do it. I mean, but we do. We just listen, let's have conversations, let's have, and it's not wrong to argue or be on different sides.
No.
But let's not make it, my wife is not political at all. And she posted, she goes, people have unfriended me on Facebook because she supports Donald Trump. And she's like, people have unfriended me, 30-year friends. And I can't imagine unfriending somebody because I like pepperoni on my pizza and they want ham and pineapple. And she goes, and what's the difference? Like we all go, we vote and we get what we get. And why are we hating each other? Or why can't we be friends with each other because we have a difference? Like it's, we don't disown our children because they want to play baseball and I want them to play soccer. But yet people are disowning their children because they voted for Trump or Harris. And it makes it makes no logical sense. And, that's why I think your program, and I can't say it enough, how proud I am to be on it. And
thank you.
Is so powerful because you're allowing this conversation to take place. And like I said, we've had some violent agreement. I'm sure we've had some disagreements, but, we've had this conversation where we all know we kind of want the same things. It's how we get there. And and that's what America's about. We all go and we cast our vote and, we get the government we vote for a little while. And then, then we go vote again if we don't like it and we vote the next person in.
Like think of this, like my grandmother, she lived and died in Greenwood, Mississippi, one of the reddest states in America. And, her grandson, went off to, to work in, New Jersey and Virginia and, Wisconsin, North Carolina, just off, something I heard, about her, But I also wanted to say, man, even though we have more, we got to keep the people in your area in mind. Just because it's off the news doesn't mean that people down there aren't still suffering. People still trying to put their lives back together. Some people lost a little, some people lost everything. Every little bit counts. Just like you said, electric workers, if you listening, get in your truck and head on down, man. you know, and every little bit counts, man. You know, whatever you can send. And that's one thing I'm happy about with this country is besides at the beginning of each storm, we don't politicize the recovery. Like, you know,
Right.
they'll chitter chat at the beginning, and, you know, oh, what did you say about me, you know, last month or whatever.
People, you know, we go through these storms, and so we're a little bit more used to specifically hurricanes, right? And so we bounce back from them pretty quick. But we all know that for the first 3 or 4 days, we're on our own. We're probably not going to have power. We probably are going to have trouble getting a policeman or ambulance out. And so I don't want to say it's the Wild West, because neighbors take care of neighbors. You know, I have several 80-year-old, you know, couples and singles in our community. And you go over and you help them rake their lawn, and you help them pick up their everything that's been disheveled in their life. And you know, but we know that, you know, not even the devastating that, you know, we weren't as devastated as Western North Carolina, which was, you know, they changed the the look of the mountains. You know, I mean, think about that. I mean, that's coming down, and that's really, really rough. And we do get a hurricane like that, like Andrew or Katrina, every 20 or 30 years. But you know, it's just tough. And so it's tough on a politician, because there's only so much you can do right. You know, in Florida, we've kind of gotten used to, hey, here's the Central Florida Fairgrounds. We can put 1,000 electric trucks there.
Yeah.
Well, then it's like, oh crap, the storm changed and it's coming towards the Central Florida Fairgrounds. Let's not let it ruin our 1,000 trucks, because if it ruins them, we're all in trouble. Let's get them back up to Tallahassee. You know, so there's this little game that goes on with just trying to move assets around the state. And, you know, Western North Carolina was not prepared. I'm not sure why they weren't prepared. I think there'll probably be a lot of case studies on what they could have done different to prepare or evacuate, knowing that a storm was coming and going to drop 10 to 20 inches of rain. So it seems like
I don't really think they can understand that. You know, when you see what I'm saying? They just think, oh, it's rained here hard before.
I agree. Until you live it, you don't think that little creek that you can walk across without getting your knees wet is going to turn into a 50-foot, 100-yard raging destruction.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what they faced. And you know, we just vacationed in Lake Lure 2 summers ago. Beautiful place in the world, just beautiful, right next to Chimney Rock. Well, I'm so glad we went, because it won't be the same in my lifetime. And it's sad. And, you know, and I have friends my sister lives in Asheville, my friends who have a place in Chimney Rock that survived. You know, so but it's never going to be the same. And so I thought Harris probably took a little bit on the chin, due to, quote, the federal response being slow. But I also know that we are faster in Florida, not because of the federal response, but because of our state response. Our state has gone through this enough that our governors, and Ron DeSantis did a great job, but the governors before him, you know, have set the foundation of, this is how you prepare for a storm, with electric assets mostly, right? And then recovery, like every county has to have a debris removal system in place within 24 hours of a storm. Like you have to have your DOT prepared, and you have to have your major roads cleared within 24 hours. And so you can at least get police and ambulances where they need to go within 24 hours of a storm. But if you're not doing this regularly, you don't really understand that it's a real problem when you can't get police and ambulances places, right? And you know, in North Carolina, it's been weeks, and there's probably still places they can't get ambulances, you know.
All right, we got to wrap.
I know I went on a tangent there, but
no, and I didn't want to cut you off, because we need all of that. What I want you to do in closing, right, before you give us your contact information and how we can support you, man, because I definitely want to take part in reasonable arguments. Let's say you have the ear of Donald J. Trump, and you're like, hey man, I'm from the place you moved to. I'm not from New York. I'm from Florida, and I got a way for you to unite this country. What would be some of the things that you would suggest he do?
This is gonna sound silly. Maybe I would immediately pardon Hunter Biden. Um, I would, look at people and say, I think he needs to walk back this political persecution rhetoric that he had coming into the election and understand that part of what the people said on Tuesday is we don't want our tax dollars and our government entities used as retribution to the American people, whether it's the IRS, whether it's the Department of Justice. We don't want that. And so we didn't want it from the last guy. We don't want it from you either. Just because you won doesn't give you the right to. We're not saying you to get back at the last guy, because then it's just tit for tat for how many years. Yeah. And so I think that's part of. That's one thing I'd like to hear from him. Just hey, I'm going to try to unite the country, and I think it's probably better to hear what you have to say, but because you kind of I wasn't quite ready for the question, but I think one thing is, Republicans have been so hell-bent, if I can use that word, on this Hunter Biden deal, right? And maybe the guy broke the law, maybe he didn't, but it needs to be, hey, listen, we're going to get past this, right? And I think from the way you look at it, if he pardoned Hunter Biden, it would say, hey, listen, we're gonna go in a different direction. I think that would calm some people who think he's going to use this political retribution or all the things he's being accused of doing, because he said them in the heat of a political campaign. Yeah. And a lot of people say a lot of things in the heat of a political campaign that either they won't do or can't do, because you need Congress, right? That's the part of our system. So I think part of it is unifying is who he appoints to some of these positions. And I'm not saying that you go and get Chuck Schumer, who's going to be, but I think there's some, or Nancy Pelosi, but I think there's some Democrats who he can say, listen, I want you to come be part of the administration, and we're going to move forward in this country. I really think Donald Trump was offered a gift, and I hope he recognizes it. And the gift the American people, I think, gave to him was the opportunity to unwrap this gift of unity. And it's up to him to decide whether or not he accepts that gift from the American people and uses it in the right way. And, because the American people gave him the House, they gave him the Senate, they gave him the popular vote. And, he can either use that and say, oh, I'm going to get, jam this down your throat. And there's going to be some of that. There's always this for that in politics.
Come on. That's part of the game.
So there's always some of this. So, but I'm not trying to be unrealistic, but I think there is this opportunity for him to say, we're going to unite the country this way. We're not going to tolerate North Korea sending 10,000 troops to Ukraine on behalf of Russia. Like, North Korea, you need to pull those 10,000 troops back, or it's going to be a real problem for our world. And and that happened 2 weeks ago, and nobody really reported on it. But North Korea and Russia allying themselves is a problem. Like, that's a real problem. And so, so there's those things that I think he can, our government telling Israel, we don't want you to take actions as a sovereign country. We want you to take the actions we want. And, I don't think we would appreciate other countries telling us that. And so I don't think we should tell other countries things we're not willing to hear. So, yeah. But what do you see as a unifying? What could he do for you to say, hey, I see this as unification?
I would go to him like, man, I have trust issues when it comes to you. Let's start there. But at the end of the day, you won. Like, I've worked campaigns, And when I went back and looked at the numbers, you won. What your people did that they don't get credit for and that we all joked you about was campaigning in places you knew you couldn't win. Because in those places you chipped at margins, and even if they weren't from the area you were getting the votes, they have friends, the internet, this, that, and the other. So once again, kudos to you on the way you ran your campaign. I'm apprehensive. I'm apprehensive about not just the political attacks. I feel like he's more CEO friendly. So I want to know, for me, someone who, I'm bragging, but, I make a decent yearly, wage, but it's not quite six figures. So I feel like, what's in it for me as just a regular, everyday worker?
Can I make more money, or can this dollar go farther?
Yeah. So, that, and then just you brought something up, and I don't know if I would have thought of that, but just saying, you know what, the DOJ said we're good, so guess what? I'm good. Let's move on. Yes, elections have consequences. I say it all the time. And those consequences mean that people on the left, progressives, there are going to be some things that you're going to be yelling at your rep about, and they can't do nothing with their little punk ass vote. But grandstand, and things are going to go through. But just understand that there was another 70 million that voted for the other person too. They're Americans too. And, we don't want to feel like it's 4 years of us being in a foreign country. So, I guess just, I don't expect him to, be different than who he is. Donald Trump is Donald Trump.
Yeah, I don't think as much as we wish it, it's not going to change.
Be clear.
I always say Donald Trump reminds me of my first political boss. And what we said about my first political boss is his name was Tom Slade. And my first boss came and put his arm around me. He's like, you only need to know one thing. You work for Boss Slade now. Boss Slade will lead us through fire. Now, by God, he sets half of them, but he will lead us through. And I really think that's Donald Trump, and I think that people know that he sets fires. They know that they don't like all of his tactics. But I think at the end of the day, they have the confidence that he's going to see us through. I might be wrong about that, but I think that people who voted for him were willing to overlook the fires that he sets.
Yeah. So for me, I'm going into this open-minded. Not for nothing, me and Sean were laughing. We were like, "Hey, man, this makes my podcast numbers go up because everybody's gonna want to listen to whatever you're out to say." So from a selfish standpoint, thank you. But
yeah. Tell him to go ahead and just rip me a new one. It's fine. I've heard it all. I've heard it all. Get those numbers up.
Yeah, man. But at the same time, I think, like we were talking about with every issue we brought up, we probably disagree on a lot of like the core things, but we agree on some of the peripheral stuff, and then on some of the things we agree about the core things, and then we disagree about the peripheral stuff. So I would just want him to, say, "Hey, Hakeem, I know you said some things about me. I said some things about you, but me, you, and Mike, we got to try to make some things happen. Yeah. It's going to be some things that you are absolutely going to hate. But at the same time, I think there's some things that we are going to bring that's going to be better for all Americans and not just for the left or the right. And like I said, elections have consequences. You don't want laws to be jam through and sign, then you're supposed to go out and make sure that one of the houses is in your corner. It's not. So what I'm telling my listeners right now, man, is don't give up. Don't be discouraged. Listen to Jamie, because I think it's more of him out there than the person you're arguing with in your comments. I promise that.
That's awfully nice. Thank you. That means a lot to me. Thank you very much.
No, I see it all the time. I work in an area, in a district that went for Trump. When I'm driving home, there were Trump signs everywhere, and look, at first it bothered me, but then I remember, like, when I have to go to like ShopRite for my residents or whatever, that's their ShopRite, and they're treating me kindly. Oh, what's going on over at Miravie? It's a assisted living facility. Director, the food service director there. So so I'm like, these are the same people that are, asking me about my day, asking me about what's going on at the job, asking me about my residents. And yes, if I live down here, we're probably going to walk into that booth. We're probably going to pull the curtain. We're probably going to vote different all the way down the line.
And you know what? That's okay. That's okay.
And that's what, like, I'm maturing, and but I just want people to understand, I'm maturing to understand that once it's over, it's over. Now let's figure out how we move on. Let's figure out how we navigate, this country, because no matter who the leader is, we still have the same issues, and we have to solve them. Whether you agree with tactics, rhetoric, as we spoke about earlier, there are going to be some tough decisions going to be made in the first 6 months, and a lot of people are not going to be happy about them, but they have to be made. So, hey, how can we follow you, support you?
So I've got 2 social handles. I'm at Reasonable Arguments on YouTube, and on Substack at Reasonable Arguments. And then I'm at RepJam, REPJAM, on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter. Back in the day when you had Twitter, you tried to keep your handle small, right?
Yeah.
And then you can find me on Amazon for the book if you want to. The book is, like I said, it's not political. You might like this story, but I tell it in the book. But my wife and I will have our 4-year anniversary this December.
Oh,
and when we started dating, she's, like I said, she's not political at all. She's like, "What? I don't understand why you're in politics." And I said, "Well, what I'll do is, in all my dating grandeur, I wrote her a memo and it said, here's 8 speeches that had inspired me to be involved in politics." And then she wrote children's books about our granddaughters visiting. And I was like, well, I've started these books. I'm going to finish a book. And I said, well, I'm going to do this one on American speeches. And so I have 20 American speeches. And I try not to bog it down. It's like a 1-page introduction of, who gave the speech, a small bio, why I feel like the speech is important, and then like a little, tidbit about the speech, and the fact that people may or may not know about the speech, and then the speech, like I just like because you start looking for books of speeches, and there's not that many that have the entire speech without the author writing this much, And so it's just called American Speeches That Changed History. And so she listened to them, and she continued to date me anyway. And so I joke that my next book will be Dating for Nerds.
I got you.
So thank you. I appreciate it. And like I said, I'm honored to be on your show, and I'm really honored by the conversation, and I mean that. And I think the more, and it's funny because my wife says, well, why are you going on, shows that are on the left? I'm like, because we we need to talk, and I really appreciate the talk,
Well,
and thank you.
it's a legitimate question, man, because a lot of times when you're in it, you don't think that the stuff that you despise on the right comes from the left until you see it yourself. And I disagree with that too. Like, I'm not this warm water, middle of the line when I say compromise. Like, I'm a director. I have staff. So I tell them all the time, like, the compromise doesn't mean like both of you are gonna be happy. Like, I tell them that all the time. And I just want people to understand that you can appease one crowd, and then you could have another crowd say, I don't like it, but I understand why. But instead, what we have is, aha, we beat you. Now deal with our laws, or whatever. And it just gets ugly. And hopefully this can be the start of us getting back to some civil, like, really, like, discourse, and just being able to talk about things, even argue, like, and but I don't know, I don't like that, but then saying, hey, I still disagree with you, or whatever, man. But tell the wife, I
We
said,
always
hey.
we always describe it in our history as the loyal opposition, because we're loyal whether we're in charge or the other people are in charge. We're all still loyal to America, right? And so there's from the very beginning we've had opposing views, and we have to understand that our system's based upon, and we haven't always been good at it, but it's based upon conducting the will of the majority while protecting the rights of the minority. And
Yeah.
we have to understand that with the majority comes that responsibility of hearing the minority and making sure that their rights are understood and heard and protected, because without protecting the rights of the minority, regardless of which side is in the minority, we're not America. Like, that's what makes us America, is protecting the rights of the minority. And so I feel like people have lost that's part of our foundation.
Yeah.
Right.
So look, man, thank you so much.
Thank
Once
you.
again, you talk about an honor. Just for somebody to actually listen and want to come and have a discussion with me makes me feel so great. And it actually makes me feel so much better about these next 4 years, not to be overly dramatic. I'd gladly return the favor. So let's please keep in touch.
Yes,
And
sir.
I'll be following you, and checking you out, man. And I just so enjoyed just the conversation, just even the way you disagree with me. It was just nice to have a discussion, and know that we can disagree and still want the same things, sort of. So
yeah, absolutely.
So you be well. Enjoy your weekend,
You
man.
too. Yes, sir. You
Once
too.
again, thanks again.
Real honor. Thank you.
No problem. Take care.